I have a pretty regular car. I have a pretty regular house, and I don't have, a super expensive watch, designer clothes, or a garage full of luxury cars. And honestly, I could probably go out and buy some of those things. I could, as humbly as possible, I could go get a Porsche. I could buy a nicer house. I could go buy an expensive watch, but I don't really want to because I'd personally rather be rich than look rich. And I think there's a really important distinction between those two things that a lot of people miss. I feel like a lot of people associate being wealthy with what wealth looks like from the outside. A nice car, a big house, a Rolex watch, designer clothes like Gucci, expensive vacations to Dubai and Japan, etc. And there's absolutely nothing wrong with any of those things in particular. If you genuinely enjoy them and you can comfortably afford them, then that's great. That's perfectly fine. But I think there's a problem when you start buying these things primarily because you want other people to see them, because then you're not really buying the thing for yourself, right? You're not buying it because it's something that you fully enjoy and it's something that you want. You're buying it mostly for the reaction you hope you'll get from other people. And this is the part that I think is really interesting. Who are you actually trying to impress? For some people, maybe it's, who you went to high school with. Maybe it's your coworkers. Maybe it's people you don't even know. And a lot of times, maybe it's people you see on social media. And the crazy thing is, the majority of those people probably don't care nearly as much as you think that they do. You buy a $70,000 car because you want people to think that you're successful. Someone's going to see that and think, okay, nice car. And then they're going to continue about their day. They're not going to even have a second thought if they even had the first thought in the first place. Meanwhile, you're the one that has to make that payment on the car every single month. You're the one that's paying the interest. You're the one that's paying the insurance. And you're the one that's responsible for maintaining the car. And if you financed it, you're potentially sacrificing money that could have been building your future. So you traded actual wealth for the appearance of wealth. And here's what really changed my perspective on this. The people who actually matter in your life don't love you because of what you own. Your family doesn't love you because of your car. Your girlfriend or boyfriend don't love you because of your watch or your house, etc. Your closest friends aren't your friends because of the house that you live in. The people who genuinely care about you would probably still love you if you drove a $5,000 car, lived in a small apartment, and wore clothes from Walmart. I literally went and bought a shirt from Walmart last week. And that's because they actually care about you, not your possessions. And once you realize that, I think a lot of the pressure to look wealthy starts to disappear. And that's basically how I look at my own life. I have a fairly regular car, I have a fairly regular house, and I'm completely okay with that. Could I spend more? Absolutely. Could I go buy a nicer car? Absolutely. Could I move into a much nicer house? Yeah, for sure. But every time I spend money on something, I always ask myself, do I actually want this? Or do I want people to think that I have this and I can afford this? And if the answer is the second one, where you can't actually really afford it and you're buying it just for other people, and a lot of times people who aren't even a significant part of your life, then it's usually a pretty easy no for me. Because for me, I'd rather have the money instead. I'd rather have my emergency fund. I'd rather have money in my TFSA or my tax-free savings account. I'd rather have the ability to handle a unexpected expense without having to stress over it. I'd rather have the ability to take a career opportunity because I have money saved and, I kind of want to take a little bit of a risk. I'd rather have financial freedom. And those things aren't nearly as visible because we don't really talk about them that much, right? I saw a post actually earlier today and it said, we celebrate when someone buys a car or when they buy a more expensive house. We don't celebrate when someone has maxed out their TFSA for the third year in a row or reached $200,000 in their net worth. And that's because nobody sees your investment account when you're walking down the street, right? Nobody compliments you on your emergency fund. Nobody sees that you invested $500 this month, but those things are building something, right? They're buying you options and eventually they're buying you freedom. And I've actually learned this lesson the hard way. When I needed a new car a few years ago, I could have bought something much more practical, but, instead I wanted something nicer because I wanted something that looked good. And while, I didn't go buy a Porsche or, anything crazy like that, I still went a little bit above what not necessarily I was comfortable with, but, if I'm looking back on that time, at this point in my life, I'm thinking, okay, maybe it would have been better to get something a little cheaper and then put the rest of that money into investments because I would be ahead of where I am now. Now, again, like I said, luckily I didn't go and buy a luxury car, but this is a prime example, right? I wanted something that looked good, and I ended up financing a vehicle that cost me significantly more than the car itself was worth, once you factor in the loan and the interest. And I spent a long time thinking about whether I could afford the monthly payment or the biweekly payment instead of thinking about the total cost. And that's something that I don't want to repeat. And if you guys take advice from this video, hopefully you don't repeat either. Because if you feel like you want to look like you can afford something, you kind of subconsciously start to convince yourself that, you actually can, even if you can't. And this directly ties into lifestyle inflation, right? You get a raise, you make more money, and suddenly you think, you know what? I deserve a nicer car, a nicer house. It could be more expensive restaurants, more expensive vacations. And again, there's nothing wrong with enjoying your money, but if every raise comes in and you immediately take on a higher lifestyle, a more expensive lifestyle, you can make a lot more money or have a significantly higher income without actually becoming wealthier. And that's why when I got a $13,000 raise around 3 years ago, I didn't immediately go out and upgrade my lifestyle, right? I increased my investments because I was already comfortable with how I was living and I was happy. And I'd rather use that extra money, especially while I'm young, to make my future easier than my present look more expensive. And I always think eventually I want to enjoy the money that I'm building, right? The wealth that I'm building. I want to be able to enjoy it and not have to stress about it. But I know that in my earlier years, investing and taking advantage of time in the market while I'm young is extremely important. But, I don't want to spend my entire life driving a, quote unquote basic car just so I can say I have a huge investment account. And that's not the point. If I eventually have enough money that I can comfortably buy a Porsche without it affecting my financial future, I would probably buy one. If I want a nicer house that I can comfortably afford, I will buy one. Right? The difference is that I want to buy those things because I want them, not because I want, strangers to think that I'm successful. And there's a massive difference between enjoying wealth and performing wealth or acting like you have all this money, right? Because that actually has a reverse effect and it makes it harder for you to build wealth. So that's why I'd rather be rich than look rich. I'd rather have the money than the thing that proves I have the money. I'd rather have the financial freedom than financial pressure from loans and interest and taking on things I can't afford. I'd rather have investments that nobody can see than possessions that everyone can see. Because honestly and truthfully, at the end of the day, the people who actually matter in your life do not care what car you drive. They don't care what watch you're wearing. They don't care how big your house is. They care about only you. So if you're building wealth in your 20s, don't feel like you need to prove it, right? This is such an important time in your life. If you're in your 20s or again, even earlier, it's so important that you take advantage of the time you have and don't feel like you need to prove that you're building wealth, right? You don't need to look rich. You just need to keep building because eventually I'd rather be rich than look rich. So that's it for the video, guys. Hopefully you were able to take something from it. If you did, please feel free to subscribe to the channel. Thank you guys for watching and I'll see you in the next one.